Okay, I wanted to cover economic policy today, and certainly I wanted to get into the three authors that I had mentioned in the previous video, Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. This is all going to be on the test, right? Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto, and then John Maynard Keynes with the general theory of money, interest, and money, let's say. In any case, these are the three authors that I wanted to talk about, and then today I'm going to discuss this, and then tomorrow I'll probably cover fiscal policy, and then the next day I'm going to cover monetary policy, which these things are so relevant now. It's so interesting. Okay, so we'll start with Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations in 1776, talking about specialization, that you ought to specialize in things that you're building. And so a company should specialize, and then the workers should specialize. And he used the idea of this pin factory, in that in a pin factory, you would have each individual take on one task and do that task well. And then he expanded it to not only should you do that for a company, but even a region could do it. So for instance, Chicago's good with trading markets, and so we could specialize in that. New York's good at banking. Silicon Valley's good at technology. And so those things would all be like specializations. And then he would take it one step further and say countries could specialize too, specialize in certain things that they do better. Japan's really good at building cars, right? Good, long-lasting cars that are not too expensive. United States has become better and better at oil, right? So certainly a specialization that we have now. Farming, of course, in the United States has become so productive. Technology in the United States has become so productive. And so specialize in the areas that you're best at, and then you can trade with each other, and that's going to lead to cheaper products for everybody, and everybody's going to do better. And then also just remember, the idea with Adam Smith was supply and demand is going to make all the decisions. So supply and demand is going to decide whether or not you're going to buy a product, what the price is going to be of the product. And so people are willing to spend more for an iPhone than they are for a Samsung. And so that's like a great sort of comparison of specialization plus at the same time what the market's going to require, what the market's going to ask for in supply and demand. The next one that I've got listed here is Karl Marx, and that's the Communist Manifesto. And I brought in a tissue so I could erase part of this because I wanted to talk about how this Communist Manifesto idea really plays out. And there's all sorts of things that you can talk about with it. Means of production, like who's controlling the means of production? Who's going to be the one who's making the decisions about what's being built? Who's going to own the factories? Who's going to own all the facilities where power is generated or anything like that? And so in the communist plan, the idea was that the government was going to take over the means of production, which seems fine, except the government's not very good at determining markets, and the government's also not very good. There's a bumblebee outside of the window. By the way, it just rained all over the place, and so Grace and I thought it would be a good idea to come out into the front instead. I'll show you the bumblebee because it's huge, Grace. So the government's not going to be very good at determining what the levels are of what's going to be produced, and then you also lose this idea of what's going to encourage people to innovate. And so in a communist system, how are you going to encourage people to innovate and they're still going to get paid the same amount, right? Everybody's going to sort of get paid the same amount, and who's going to step up? Would Steve Jobs been able to do what he did with Apple in a communist system where you don't have this opportunity to innovate and you don't have the reward that comes with it? You certainly, Steve Jobs be a billionaire now because of what he did with Apple. And so those things were part of it. And so, but this is the bottom line for what happened in the Communist Manifesto, which you can't argue with that this happens. And by the way, it's happening right now. And so the idea was that in an economy, you're going to have peaks and you're going to have valleys. You're going to have peaks and you're going to have valleys. And what, for the most part, the argument that that Karl Marx was making was you're going to continue production all the way to the top here. You're going to continue production, and then you're going to see, hey, wait a minute, the sales are starting to fall. So I'm going to lay off the workers right here. Workers are fired, right? Fire the workers at this spot. But the workers have already built all of this inventory, and so now the workers are fired. They're at home. They're not making any money. The owner is still making money because he's still got inventory, like Ford, for instance. You know, Ford still has cars, even though the workers aren't there. And so the workers are gone. They've been laid off, but Ford still has inventory. They're still selling cars. And so the owners are still making money while the workers are gone. Now, of course, eventually, you know, you get to the point where you're like, oh, okay, well, we've lost all of our inventory, the market's gone down, but we need to start building back up our inventory, so we're going to hire people again. So they start to hire people again, and then you're going to have the point where they're going to have a job again. But again, those owners were making money all along, whereas the other ones were like out on the street, maybe starving, you know, at the time when Marx was writing the Communist Manifesto in 1848. So that's what his real argument was, that there's these peaks and valleys and the workers are going to be taken advantage of, which is true, and it's still true in this system, but at least now we've got like these government backstops, things like unemployment, where they can at least collect unemployment while they're waiting for these peaks and valleys to take place. Okay, the next one, and of course I'm simplifying a lot of this stuff right now, right? In the class we'd be talking a lot more in detail about it, but the next one is John Maynard Keynes in the General Theory of Money. So with this one, this is really what happens now in our government. Anybody can say whatever they want, but as soon as we had an issue with coronavirus, the government ramped up everything. The government ramped up giving money to individuals through unemployment and the PPP Act and all those sort of things, which under like a Adam Smith, the government's supposed to stay out of that stuff. So the government's not supposed to be getting involved with, you know, day-to-day operations and, you know, let the marketplace figure itself out. And there had already been pandemics, right? In 1776, there had already been pandemics. And so Adam Smith was aware of those things. Adam Smith did say things like, oh, we do have to have certain regulations, but at least as far as this goes, you know, Adam Smith, especially in, let's say, the 2009 economic recession, he would have said, hey, let those companies fail. Let the marketplace figure that out. The government shouldn't be stepping in and doing anything. But now, Keynes came out in 1936 with his book, and he talked about the idea of the government ought to step in during tough economic times. And they use fiscal policy, that's taxing and spending, and monetary policy, that's money supply and interest rates, to impact what's happening. And holy cow, are they doing it now? The stimulus packages, the fiscal policy that's taking place with all the money that the government's spending, cutting taxes, and then the Federal Reserve, probably $7 trillion this year, the Federal Reserve is going to buy mortgage-backed securities, government bonds, municipal bonds, federal bonds, state bonds, backstopping the corporate bonds. They're stepping into everything. I thought it was a lot when it was $4.5 trillion. They're going to do $7 trillion in 1 year. Remember, it took them years to add up to the $4.5 trillion. And so that's a big question of what's going to happen if there's going to be inflation or not. But that's for a different time. So he was the one, John Maynard Keynes, who said, step in when the government or when the economy is suffering, have the government step in. Right, so that's where we're going to start off tomorrow when we're talking fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, have a great, well, I'm not sure when I'm going to release this, probably on Wednesday, so have a good one.